Welcome to our Portuguese Table podcast. I'm Maria Lawton, the Azorean Green Bean.
And I'm Angela Simoes, and we're just two chicks dishing about Portuguese food, culture, and what it means to be Portuguese.
So grab a glass of vinho or un copo de café and join us as we talk about our favorite foods, reminisce about growing up Portuguese,
and interview some of our community's most successful chefs and food writers.
So sit down at our Portuguese table.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Our Portuguese Table. I'm Angela Simoes, and we have Maria, the Azorean Green Bean. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Angela. How are you, honey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really well, and I'm really excited about today's podcast. We have an amazing guest.
We do. We have David Leite from Leite's Culinaria. To our listeners, if you have not gone to leitesculinaria.com, you have to go there right now because it is a fabulous website.
Not at this very moment. First, you're going to listen to what we have to say.
Right. But well, come on in, David. Say hello to everybody.
Hi, Angela. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hi, hon.
So, David, I have to say, I know we've known each other for a long time, but I have a little bit of, what do they call it, when you get starstruck a little bit and you're kind of nervous because you've done so much. I mean, I was reading your bio and, I always knew that you had done a ton, but oh my gosh, all the awards that you've won, the awards that the book won, the New Portuguese Table, your writing, you have people, like you have a whole staff.
We're very proud of you, David, and I think every Portuguese person out there should know about you because you have done amazing things, and you're Portuguese, and we're so proud of you. And like Angela said, you have people. So
I do have people.
You do. So when we say your people will talk to my people, well, we have no people, but you have people.
So, Davis, tell us a little bit about, how you got started and when did you know that you were going to go down the culinary path?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting story, and the reason why it's interesting is I grew up in a very Portuguese area, Fall River, Massachusetts, which is not too far away from Maria.
That's right.
And
Fall River.
Exact Fall Rive.
Fall Rive. Yeah, this Fall Rive. This Fall Rive. That's it.
Fall Rive. And I despised being Portuguese when I was young. Despised it. A lot of the Portuguese back then weren't treated very well. They were coming over, newly arrived from the Azores, almost all from the Azores. And we weren't treated well. We were kind of on the bottom economic rung of many situations, and a lot of Portuguese back then were treated very poorly by the community of other people, people who've been here before or longer. And I picked that up. I could sense that, and I felt that there was something wrong, inherently wrong, just by being Portuguese. So from a very early age, I mean, we're talking 5 and 6 years old, I wanted to be blonde hair and blue-eyed and have a last name of Stevens. I wanted Samantha Stevens on Bewitched to adopt me, and I wanted the Von Trapp children. I wanted to be their brother, their long-lost brother. And so I kind of wove in and out of Portuguese food. I had stuff that I enjoyed that my family made, but I really wanted to be American. And, of course, it didn't dawn on me that I was American. I didn't understand that I was American. I thought I was Portuguese. I didn't realize you could be Portuguese-American. And then it was when my grandmother died in 1992. I was 32 years old. And it was then when I realized a lot of the dishes that she made disappeared from our family's table because my grandmother had been making them for 40 or 50 years, 60 years, and even longer, actually. And so no one made them. And my mom had her versions, but my grandmother had been making them for decades and decades. My mom didn't make them. So her versions disappeared. And then I became very frightened that I was going to lose whatever little vestige of Portugueseness I had to me and to my family. I was going to lose that. And I became concerned that what happens if my mom passes and I lose what is so identified with her and my aunts. And so that's what was the impetus for me to ask my mother. I asked my mother for the very first recipe, which was her. It was her Portuguese baked beans. So it's a version of feijão com tomatada. It was her version, and of course she had hot dogs in it because we're from Massachusetts, and of course Franken beans. So it had chorizo and it had hot dogs and bacon, but it was her version, and they weren't sweet with molasses or brown sugar. They were the Portuguese version.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
And I couldn't make them. I mean, the recipe she gave me was not even a recipe. It was nothing was correct. My mother doesn't own measuring cups, doesn't own scales, doesn't own measuring spoons, nothing. She's like, just put a handful of this and a handful of that, and my hand is 4 times the size of hers.
Yeah.
It never came out. But that started me on this mission or this passion to learn, to protect and to save our
That's
family's
perfect.
food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was no need. I wasn't looking for a career. I had a career in advertising. I had done Bill Clinton's advertising. I had done IKEA. When IKEA came to America, I was on the team that launched the IKEA campaign. Chrysler. I'd worked on many campaigns throughout the years, so I wasn't interested in a new career. But I wanted to share with people this idea of sort of protecting and saving your family's recipes. And I did it by videotaping my mother cooking.
Oh, did you? I never knew that.
I love this story. I remember the story when we first met, David.
Yeah, and it was the videotaping of my mother making, it could have been the feijão, I'm not sure, or sopa de couve, that she started telling me family stories. Stories that either I didn't listen to and pay attention to, or I never had heard before.
Right.
And so suddenly I went, oh my God, I have these tapes and these stories, and I thought this is a really wonderful way for anyone of any culture or heritage or nationality to be able to get stories. So then I wrote an article, and I submitted it to different newspapers, New York Times, LA Times, and the Chicago Sun-Times for some reason. I don't know why I chose them. And the New York Times and the LA Times were like, they didn't even write back. But the Sun-Times was interested, and it appeared. And once that happened, the magic of seeing my name in print along with food is kind of what launched the food writing career.
Wow, that's
kind of light bulb went off.
Yeah. Now, what's funny is David and I have met and over coffee, and we had a wonderful meeting and getting to know each other. And I'm going to say the same thing I said to you then, and that is, it sometimes it takes us a little bit long to get there, to embrace who we are. But what matters is that you reach that time, and you did reach that time, and you have embraced who you are.
Yeah.
And even though, yes, we're American, and some parts of us, Portuguese American, but inside your DNA, you are Portuguese. And that is something that you'll always be, no matter what. And you carry all of that with you. And that comes from your grandmother and your mother, and you'll carry it through the rest of your life. That is who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. There's a lot of people who all their life they refuse to be who they are. And I find that very sad. But you came to that, and that's a wonderful thing. And that's telling a lot of our listeners out there who say, oh, yeah, I'm Portuguese, but I'm, 4th generation, so I'm more American than Portuguese. Well, you're not. It's still in there, and you have to be proud of who you are.
You do. And that's what the embracing of that, because it was very funny, because when I came to New York in 1984, and people... sometimes I would get around to heritage, what's your nationality, what's your background? I would say Portuguese, and people are like, oh, Portuguese, that's so exotic. And I'd be like, exotic?
And then they'd say, where is that?
The person I knew growing up had a last name with a vowel. We all were Portuguese. That's not exotic.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to see my culture, our culture, to be cast in the role of an exotic culture, something that was unusual for a lot of other people. And then you start slowly hearing, oh, I went to Lisbon, or I went to, not so much the Azores, the people that I was meeting, but they were saying, I went to Lisbon, or I went to the south of Portugal, to the Algarve, or the Minho. It's such a beautiful country. The food is very interesting, very different. And that's when I started getting an appreciation that was outside of my family. It wasn't pride that came just from finally admitting and embracing my culture inside my family. It was pride and embracing my culture from an external source, too, which was fascinating.
Very interesting. Now, where did your family come from, David?
My father's family comes from Maya in the north part of San Miguel, and my mother's family came from Punta Delgada, my grandfather, and my grandmother came from Rabo de Peixe. Rabo de Peixe, I think?
Hopped pish.
Rabarinha?
Rabainha. Okay, it's in the hopped pish.
Yeah,
yes, it's a big fishing community.
My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, maternal grandfather came from from Punta Delgada, and my mother and father, my grandmother and my grandfather on my father's side, both came from Maya.
Interesting. Now you know what's in Maya, don't you? It's Goriana tea.
Chagoriana, yes, which my father worked at, which my grandmother worked at, and which one aunt worked at.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's now in its 7th generation of the same family owning it now.
Yes,
it's
I
amazing.
was just there last year when I went on a National Geographic tour. I was a guide of the Azores for the National Geographic.
That's cool.
Company. Yeah, and one of the first day we were in San Miguel, and we went up to Chagoriana.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions for you, David.
Sure.
So you talked about the first dish that you cooked, which was the feijão.
Yes.
What's your first food memory?
The first food memory I have, I don't know which is the first, so I'll tell you both. One was refusing to eat soup at the cove. Refusing to eat, or soup at the cove is the way my family pronounced it. Refusing to eat it. But the other memory that I have is my grandmother, my mother's mother, Vovó Costa, taking a chair. Remember the old chrome leg chairs that had the patent leather seat in the back, dragging that to the stove backwards, and then putting one of my grandfather's work shirts on me backwards and buttoning it in the back and rolling up my sleeves and stirring whatever was in the panela. Rice,
that's so
sweet. It could be onions, it could be soup, whatever it was, and she and I working, I always say, shoulder to bosom together on there, and every once in a while her kind of gathering me up and like kissing me on the top of the head and smelling her Ginate perfume. And that's really, I think that's, either one of those are my first. I'm not sure which is the exact first, but they're very young.
They're beautiful.
You certainly have wonderful, the way you talk about your grandmother, it sounds like she was a wonderful person. You had a really special relationship with her.
I did. My mom and I had a relationship because I'm working on a memoir right now, so a lot of this stuff is very fresh, having spent so much time writing it. But my mom and I, our relationship was about eating. My mom and I ate together all the time, a lot of times secretively, because my mom was overweight, so we would sneak food when my dad wasn't there. And I had the same relationship with my godmother, my Dina. Instead of Madrinha, I called her Dina. And she was half Portuguese, half French. And it was another eating relationship there, too. Hers was always stuffing me with French stuffing and other foods that she made. But my grandmother's relationship, the relationship I had with my grandmother, ours was based on cooking. I don't remember cooking with my mother. I remember eating with her and eating with my godmother. I remember cooking with my grandmother.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've talked about that on the podcast before, where from a very, very early age, bringing your children in to the kitchen and showing them how to do things, even if they're not really helping, they're just sort of there, and they have your hand on their hand on your hand while you're stirring or whatever. But it's just exposing them to that experience and helping them to get interested in cooking. And it can be Portuguese cooking, could be any kind of cooking.
Anything, yes. But it's very important, those memories, because they, once those memories are seeded, they will sprout for the rest of that person's life. And
that's right.
Whether that person becomes a cook, a chef, a home cook, or just someone who appreciates food, they'll always be there. And you only have a certain amount of time with a child to be able to seed those memories. After that, they want to be on their own. They want to do things with their friends. And I was fortunate to have been raised. I never had a babysitter. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. But when you grow up in a Portuguese home, you don't have babysitters.
You don't have babysitters.
Because you have aunts and cousins and
That's
grandmothers and other, male cousins. Everyone will look after you, but you never had babysitters. Right. So I had 3 women who raised me. My godmother and grandmother were on the first floor in 2 different apartments. We were on the second floor, and I was constantly around them, and that's where so much of this appreciation came from.
Yeah. Now you're saying about being. I just made me think of this. I used to babysit my great niece. Mm-hmm. Now I'm much older than all of you, and I have.
No, you're not. I'm older than all 3 of both of you.
No, you're not. I'm older than you, David.
No, you're not.
And so I have my niece Anne, who once she had her baby, I took my Fridays off to babysit her because you're right. Everyone took turns with taking care of her. And that was my sister Adeline, which was her grandmother, and my sister Isabel, which is also her other aunt, and then myself. And I had Emma with me every Friday for, 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And we would always do something together, whether it was painting or music. And I think I did more with her than I actually did with my own children, which is kind of because you're able to do that. You're able because you have more time. Yeah. And one of the things we always did together is we always baked together. Mm. And so and that's the memories that I have also growing up is baking with my grandmother. But my sister is a horrible baker. So I'm thinking, where is she going to get the memory of baking? It's going to be from me. So do you know, I had a birthday party this weekend, and she just turned 9. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things she said is, Tia, when are we baking together again?
Sweet.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's important.
It's so freaking important. Mm-hmm. And I turned to my husband and I'm like, oh my God, it's like, it's still in her, and her baking is with Tia, and she loves to bake. And it's like, when are we baking it together again? Yeah. So it's in her. It's in her.
Well, especially for as the generations continue. So, the cool thing about this podcast is that Maria and I are very different generations, right? Not only are we from different parts of the country here, right? But I'm 3rd generation Portuguese. And so a lot of what you guys are talking about, I actually didn't experience as growing up as a 3rd generation Portuguese. There was family around and everything, but I did go to a daycare, and my grandmother babysat us every now and then, and we really had to make an effort to say, Grandma, show us how to cook this because we don't know how to cook it. And
really, yeah.
Yeah, and so I love hearing how with every cook and chef that we've talked to, and anybody that's written a book, it's always about the preservation, and I love Absolutely. That because. Yeah, I mean, if I could, I would take all of my grandmother's recipes and get them into a book, and even if it's just, for our family only. But it's so important to maintain because I always love that story, David, that you tell where, like you said, your hand is 4 times bigger than your mom. Right. So your handful of something is a lot different than her handful. So
Absolutely. And Maria, that's what you did with your book. You took your family's recipes.
That's right. And that's it. That's exactly it. And my thought was it was just going to be for my family.
Yes.
I mean, who knew?
Who knew, right.
And the thing is, that's what's interesting is that our culture is, and like in any kind of I don't want to say a closed culture, but a close culture, not closed, but close culture. It's the same thing. You were doing this for your family because you wanted to preserve it. And I'm sure that you've heard, and I know I certainly have heard, I don't have a recipe for such and such. My grandmother or my aunt or my mother used to make this. Now, some of the things we don't have, and we don't have certain dishes in my family's heritage because my family just either didn't like it or didn't make it or didn't have the money to be able to make it. Right. But, there are certain things that are so common amongst all of us. I mean, bacalhau com chá. I mean, there's not one Portuguese person I know who hasn't at least been somewhat affected by that.
I think that is truly the national dish.
Yeah.
I really do, David.
Yeah, we've all had that, and it all means something. And I think one of the interesting things that I've come across ever since I really embraced my heritage and my culture is the sort of what I call sort of this bigotry in a certain sense. And I mean this with great humor by saying this, is that when I publish a recipe, or in my book I have some recipes, let's say massa sovada, and I'll get someone write me there. That's not massa sovada.
I know.
That's not how my mother made it. That's not massa sovada. And I'm like, well, sorry, kiddo, that's how my grandmother made it.
Yes, you've hit it on the nose on that one.
Yeah.
It's constant. It's a constant struggle on that. And you're right, it's my family recipes. Exactly. These are not your family recipes. Exactly. These are my family recipes. And this is how my family made it. And you're absolutely right. And I've had people say, oh, and the other big debate is the soup at Kirsch.
Yeah.
You're absolutely on that. That's another one where I'll almost put a disclaimer on it before I post the recipe. And that'll be like, this is how my family makes it. But, some people do add lentils. Some people do add carrots. Some people do. It's
some people
almost
add
like
pasta, elbow macaroni.
Yes.
The influence of the Italians. And being told that's not it. That's not soup at the cove that my family had. I'm like, of course it's not, because you're not my family.
Right. And sometimes it was whatever was in the pantry.
Exactly. My grandmother had this dish. I forgot what she used to call it. Something the panella. Not soup at the panella, but it was this dish that she. I'm sorry.
Sopa de pedra.
No, not sopa de pedra. We never had that. That's mainland. But what my grandmother had was this pot on the stove that she. She had a little bit of beef left, she'd throw it in. That is sopa de panella. A little bit of beef, she'd throw it in. We have chicken the next day, she'd throw it in. And the next day, 3 days later, you have this mixture of melange of meats and vegetables, and you'd eat it. And then sometimes she'd throw in extra rice. It was whatever was left over, she threw in. So, I grew up with this sort of Frankenstein food sometimes, because nothing was ever wasted in our home.
Right.
Nothing was ever wasted.
That's funny, because with you, they put it all in a pot. With my mom and my grandmother, they would make tortas.
Ah, yeah.
And that's what she would do. So the leftover, from the big panella of the cuisines that she would make on a Sunday, throughout the week, it would be the meat and the chopped up potatoes or the carrots and with egg, and then it would be tortas.
Yeah.
So, but she would never put it back into creating a new soup. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, and every family, is different, and how you use up scraps. And the thing that's interesting that I remember my father, and I don't know if it's by choice or just because of frugality, but my father would go out to work on a very, very cold morning. I think he'd leave about 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and if I were up, many times I would see him eating soup at the cove that was left over from the day before. That was his breakfast. Because I don't think either he wanted to waste it or he wanted something very warm and he didn't want to eat oatmeal. He didn't grow up eating oatmeal.
Right.
And so we eat what we can. Well, I grew up. We ate what we could when we could.
Now,
just nothing was ever wasted.
Do you ever remember seeing your dad having soupe Leite?
No, never had that. He never had that.
Which was it's something you don't forget seeing, and that is day-old bread soaked in milk, hot milk.
No, I'd never remember seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't something that I remember anyone in our family
having. We have cousins in Lisbon, and I went to stay with them, and the father did that, but he actually used chocolate milk instead of just plain milk. And, I remember thinking it was quite an odd thing, but
Now, see, this
you
is
actually
something.
Tried it. It's pretty good.
Yeah. The thing is my dad would have that growing up. Back in St. Michael, he would have that because, again, your milk was plentiful because you had, all of that, and you had day-old bread or whatever. The bread there would get hard very quickly. I think more so than here.
Broa? Were they eating mostly broa?
Yes, pão de milho. Yeah. And then it would be that. So for him here, to have that would be something where it was his food memory.
Right.
Where he, you know what I mean? So we would see that, but we wouldn't eat it. My mom would not make it for us, but I would see my dad having that. So yeah.
David, you talked about not wasting anything, and one of the recipes in your book that I love, because it's all about like the modern cuisine of Portugal, right? And that
It's actually
yes,
three. It's the cuisine that was happening when I was writing the book, which was 2007, 2008, what I was finding there. Because I was finding that, it's so funny. The reason why I wanted to do the book in part is that the people who came to America, a lot of them didn't go back. Many families did. My family never did. My mom and dad never went back. But a lot of times when they came over, that's when their food froze. They left at a certain time, and that's the food that they had. But the thing is, back home, there were a lot of innovations. And so I was very curious to see what was happening back home, what new foods were being introduced, what new foods were being explored and discovered. So that's one third of the book. The other third of the book are classics, and the other third are my family recipes. And that's kind of the ground that I covered.
And yes, and you have one recipe in there with the potato skin curls, which I loved because it was kind of that nod to, yes, this is a modern thing, but it's a nod to not wasting anything, which is a very Portuguese thing.
Very, very Portuguese. And I'll tell you, I had it at a very fine restaurant, those potato curls, because what they do is they're the peelings of potatoes whenever they were making anything, and they realized that what they could do is just take those potato peelings and then deep fry them in an herb oil and then serve them with fried herbs on top.
Well, heck, anything deep fried is delicious, isn't it?
Exactly. But I love the fact that nothing was ever wasted.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is wonderful about our culture is, and I don't know if everyone has the same experience, but growing up and still to this day, my father makes his own wine.
Yeah.
My father makes also his own fermented pepper paste.
Yep.
My aunt makes chorizo with my father's wine and his pepper paste. My mother will make dishes with the chorizo from my aunt that contains my father's pepper paste and wine. And everybody contributes something to ingredients that are then used in dishes. And
absolutely.
I think that's amazing to be able to make so many of your own staples, your massa de pimenta, your massa de pimentão. I think that's really wonderful, and it's something that I'm so glad and I'm so grateful that I grew up experiencing.
Yeah.
And you have your own garden, right? A pretty fantastic garden.
It's not like huge, but it's definitely fecund. I mean, Lord knows we had more kale last year and tomatoes, and my father's potatoes, which was great because my father actually gave me his potatoes, which they were like the grandchildren of his latest crop, and I was able to get a crop out of them too. So it was really neat to be able to dig up the potatoes that had been in my family for a couple of years, which was nice.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you're continuing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And did you learn to garden from your grandmother, your mother?
From my father.
Oh, really? Same as Maria. That's so funny.
Yeah,
from my
same.
dad. And the interesting thing is, growing up again, like I said, I was not interested in anything Portuguese. The idea of gardening, that was for people, who like manual labor. I didn't like manual labor, and so I wasn't about to learn how to garden. And I must have gotten something through osmosis by having watched my father. And my father, they did ship me off to a farm up the street for 3 summers because I was morose and depressed, and so they thought some hard work and being outside was going to help me. And while I hated every minute of it, I'm really glad I did because I learned about so many different kinds of vegetables, and I made some friends there, and I became very friendly with the farmer and his wife. It was through my dad sending me off to the farm. When I say send off, it's like 2 miles up the street. And I rode my bike and came back, but it felt like Siberia for me. But I would watch my dad, planting potatoes and tomatoes and corn and strawberries. And I mean, one of my earliest memories, which I write about in my book, is the book that's coming out, is lying in the strawberry patch my dad had dug in the back of our house in Fall River, which the house no longer exists. It was knocked down for Route 79, and a strawberry patch, and just lying there in the sun on the dirt eating strawberries, just loving being in there. And so all this stuff I kind of watched my dad, and so now what's nice is like last year I just kept on sending him all of these photographs I took with my phone and saying, is this right? Should I do this? Should I do that? He couldn't believe how big some of the plants were growing. He just couldn't get over. And we don't use any, it's all organic. We use no fertilizer or anything.
And you have your own compost going?
Own compost going. All the soil is organic. It's been amended with organic fertilizer, manure and things that have been cured.
Nice.
And he was very surprised.
Now let me ask you this. Do you have the traditional grape arbor?
No, I don't. I don't.
I think that'll be next, David.
That might be next. I think actually the next thing for me is somehow getting around the laws of our town to build a little smokehouse.
Ooh,
nice.
I want to
So you can
have
smoke your sausage.
Yeah. 'Cause
Yes.
my aunt has her behemoth in her backyard, and I think she has just done her last batch or is going to do her last batch. She's in her late 70s, could be early 80s now.
God bless her.
I want my smokehouse because I have a little Bradley smoker, but
Yep.
you can only do so many links at once. I mean, she'll do 50 pounds of sausage all at once, and
Oh, yeah.
that's the thing that I'd like to do next.
Well, I'm very lucky that here I can go to a sausage maker and actually have them smoke it for me, which is a great thing because obviously we've got a few sausage companies that are based out of New Bedford and Dartmouth.
Right.
But to have a smokehouse would be amazing, David.
It would be really cool.
Yes, it would. Now, one of the things that I have from my father's garden, because like Angela said, when my mom would kick me out of the kitchen because, that galley kitchen didn't have room for me,
Right.
I would be outside with my dad gardening. So every time I'm out doing any planting, it's with my dad. My dad is with me, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get his raspberry bushes from the garden, my mom and dad's garden. And so I was able to dig them up, some of them up, and replant them here at my home. So I have these beautiful raspberry bushes, and it's the ones with no thorns. Because my mom refused to have anything with thorns like that.
I don't blame her.
But I have that. So next time you come down and visit your family, you're going to take a seedling of mine so you can have some black raspberries the next time.
How great that would be. We have no fruit bushes here.
Yes, you need to have that. So the next time you're down, you need to do that. We'll make sure you get some because you need to have that. That's a given.
I would love
Even before your grape arbor.
Well, my family, the first thing my dad built was in the backyard was a grape arbor.
Absolutely.
And it was three grapevines, and it was really more for shade.
Yes.
He wasn't making any wine from it. And I remember we started out with one little picnic table which then became two picnic tables, and then as the family grew and more cousins and more people were coming over from Portugal, the next thing you know, we'd have three and all kids everywhere and all squeezed on this. And then he took the arbor down because then he wanted to plant grapevines, so he had a whole acre of grapevines.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And he had that for years and years, and only recently has it gone down to very, very little, and the garden's just a couple of rows of something. Because my dad's 84 now.
Oh, how wonderful.
So he doesn't do as much, but he still loves to putter around the house.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, and that's important. That really is.
Yeah,
to keep them going. And working outside for my dad was the big thing for him. That's how he spent his time and puttering around and all of that. But it's wonderful memories.
So David, you talked about how, your dad makes the wine and then the wine is used in the chorizo. And so you've kind of got it all mixed together. So what does a typical meal look like with your family, whether it's for a holiday or you're just all getting together maybe for Sunday dinner or a birthday?
Well, it's interesting because my mom is late 70s, and my dad has some food restrictions. Now, he doesn't eat very fatty meats at all. He's very, very lean. My dad only eats 2 meals a day now. So they really have moved away from a lot of that because by a certain point in my dad's life, it was giving him a lot of indigestion, a lot of heartburn, very spicy. So they've moved away from that. Somewhat, but when I go home, my mom will still make carne asada. We're going home for Easter, so she's going to make her baked beans, which I love. And sometimes it will be, she makes the most extraordinary stuffed quahogs. Which of
stuffed
course
quahogs.
Yes.
Interesting.
Which is not something from the Azores. It's very much an American thing, But of course, the stuffed quahogs began with the Portuguese. They would add chorizo to it, and they would add the clams. And she does these amazing, amazing stuffed quahogs. And
Nice.
so I will sometimes help her do that, and we'll have that. And other times it will be just chicken with rice soup. She does make my dad soup of the cove, which, I eat. It's never been my favorite, I have to say, never been my favorite, because the kale is not something that I don't like it stewed. I'll eat it like in a salad or something, but stewed is a little slimy and slippery. And
Oh, no.
just not my thing. I know it's a national vegetable, and I'm not a big fan of it. But so it's that kind of stuff. In the old days, my gosh, it would be my mother would make, carne asada, and she would make chicken, and she'd have all of her roasted potatoes, and there would be chorizo that had been roasted, and some that's been boiled, and all kinds of stuff. My graduation, I remember we had 16 dishes.
Oh,
my mother
wow.
had made all kinds of stuff. She'd been cooking for weeks and freezing things, and it was so large we had to have it in the garage. That's another thing too. People don't understand. The Portuguese, we eat in our garage. When you have a family that's that big, you eat in the garage on nice summer days. And I grew up eating in garages in Boston and in Fall River.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've had this discussion before, Angela and I, that there can be any American holiday, but the Portuguese kind of take it and embrace it sometimes, but make it Portuguese.
Oh, yeah. And look at some of the foods that we've created, taking American foods or foods that are hyphenate foods, pizza, Italian American. In America, what do? We have chorizo pizza.
That's right.
Which is incredible. I mean, some of the ones they have up near where I live, my family live, is amazing. And then you have the meat, the meat rolls or the meat pies.
Yes.
There's this one, Hartley Meat Pies, is in Fall River, and I believe they've got a chorizo meat pie.
Yes, they do.
Which is amazing, right? And
yes,
it's the old classic meat pies from England.
Yeah.
And we put our stamp on it. And that's what I love about that, is that people are kind of surprised to see that we are very adaptable, and if we see something we like, we just appropriate it and make it our own.
Yeah.
So you said you're not a big fan of kale, stewed kale anyway.
Yeah.
And that sopa de couve isn't your favorite dish. Do you have a favorite Portuguese dish?
It's pork and clams. I can eat pork and clams every day.
Really?
I love pork and clams. Yes, I do. I love it. 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 And when I go to Portugal, I have it all the time. And even more so than frango na pucara or piri piri chicken, even more than any of that, I love that. More than cozido. Pork and clams.
Do you make it?
I do make it. There's a recipe in my cookbook. My family never made it. It's very much a mainland dish.
Yes.
I'm sure you both know some of the Alentejo. My family didn't really make it, and I never had it till I went to Portugal. And the recipe in my book is different than the one in Portugal. It's more a little brothy. Versus what they do in Portugal. They just take these chunks of pork and deep fry them, and deep fry the potatoes, and they serve it along, as you know, with the pickled carrots and the pickled onions and whatever vegetables on the side.
That juice is just to die for.
It is, and the thing is, they can do that, and they can get away with it because their pork has not been bred to be so lean like ours has. So you can take a nice chunk of pork and fry it up, and it's like delicious, and it's marbled nicely with fat. You can't do take loin here, and it's just so incredibly dry. So to do that, in order to combat that, I use pork shoulder and have it stewed a bit. And then when the clams open up and they spill their juices, it just becomes salty, and it's just
oh man,
that sounds amazing.
Every time we do one of these podcasts, I feel like I need to
we're hungry.
Hang up and go cook a meal right now because
absolutely.
Just talk about so many good things.
Now let me ask you this. I'm just going to put this out here. You know how we Portuguese everything. Have you tried when you were in St. Michael a hot dog, a Portuguese hot dog?
I can't say that I have.
Oh my God, David, you have to. The
What
next
did we do
time. Oh my God. Okay, so the last time I was there this past November, and I was in Ponta Delgada, and we were there to see a show. There was a show going on, so my family took me there to see it, and then we got out. It was around 1:00 in the morning, And as we were leaving, I see this outside, this gentleman, almost like a little food thing going on. But I didn't know what exactly it was. It was just a long line of people like waiting to get something. And so I turned to my family and I said, what is that? And they said, oh, it's your hot dogs. The guy, makes hot dogs here. And those are the people all coming out from the clubs and the parties and all that stuff. And they're having their hot dogs. And so I went, hot dogs in here? No way. You can't have hot dogs here. And they're like, oh, yeah. And it's better than your American hot dogs.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm like, oh, this is a throwdown now. This is a throw. I'm like, there is no way it can be any good as American hot dogs. Well, David, I have to tell you, they're better.
Really? How are they made?
Yes.
The toppings.
Okay. So I get there. We now are in line to get hot dogs because I'm saying there is no way, no how it can be better.
Right.
I get to the gentleman. His name is Mauricio. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of different vendors that make it, but Mauricio is the one who does it the best. Okay. So we get there and my family turns to him and says, she's from the United States. And she says, you can't make good hot dogs. So at this point, the man is like, what? And everyone's like, oh, you're going to show her off. You're going to tell her. So he's like, okay, I'm going to make one especially for you. And I'm like, okay. So he grills the hot dogs and he heats the bread on this grill. And then he takes the heated bun, puts the hot dog on there, and he puts mayo on the side of the bun.
Okay.
Then he puts one side ketchup, the other side mustard. Uh-huh. Then he puts white onions, green olives, chopped up green olives. Mm-hmm. Then he puts like a coleslaw, but it's not with mayo. It's just like a dry coleslaw, shredded carrots and cabbage on top. And he puts a sauce. I don't know what that sauce was on top of it. And then, you know how we have the little straw fried potatoes, potato chips?
Yeah.
He takes a handful of that and puts that on top. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So now you've got to hold it with two hands. There's no way you can even hold that with one.
Lean over, spread your legs so you don't spill all over yourself.
You got it. Because as I took that bite, everything just fell. It was so good.
Now, were the potato sticks from the can, or did he actually fry them himself?
I think he got them from a bag.
Okay, because one of the things I noticed was that they're very popular there, and I think that they come from Bacalhau au Brás.
Yes.
Where people, fry their own potato sticks, potato thins. But I think that a lot of people just reverted to the can because when I was there, I saw a lot of people doing that with other things too, putting those sticks on so many potato sticks on so many different dishes. And I'm like, this is wild. We eat these out of a can, and they put them on food. That's interesting. I thought you were going to say that the hot dog was actually a mini chorizo. I thought that's...
No, it wasn't. It was a meat sausage. It was a hot dog. So, David, you have to. You have to.
When I go back, I'll have to.
And it has to be Mauricio's.
Okay, I will do that. And that was in Punta Delgada?
It was in Punta Delgada, yep.
Well, they've been doing that for a while. So, because I remember being in Lisbon in, early 2000s, down at the Docas. Mm-hmm. After kind of like you said, everybody's getting out of the club at 2-3 in the morning, and they have the little hot dog cart there, and same toppings. And this guy had shredded carrots. He had corn that he put on top of it. It's all sorts of stuff. It's really, really good. You'd never expect those kinds of toppings to be on a hot dog, but it works. It works.
Yeah, speaking of corn and the vegetables you were talking on top of the hot dogs, do you guys hear this? I hear so many people say, you Portuguese don't eat that many vegetables. You don't have vegetables. And I'm like...
Yes, we did.
Right, but the thing is, in my family, we didn't. But we did, but they all were in our soups.
That's right.
That's true.
We don't have
That's right.
Oh, you have lovely green beans on the side of your plate. No, we deep fry our green beans. But, we have tons of vegetables in our soups. And so I had to really explain to people when they'd say, well, I went there and I tried to get a salad and I just got this... it's green
lettuce.
And red tomatoes and lettuce.
That's it. And
oil
maybe
and
an
vinegar.
onion. And an
And
onion.
I said, and they said, why the red and green? And I actually had to ask someone from Lisbon. I said, why the red and green? And she said, we like the sweet and the sour. We just like that flavor. And I thought, that's interesting. I said, if you want to get vegetables, order your soup.
Right.
Soup with the pedra or anything. Then you're going to get your vegetables, but you're not going to find them on the side of a plate for the most part. It's very
You're
much an
absolutely
American.
right.
Yeah.
Or English, an English thing too. Have your sides.
Or I find like if you have, and again, I don't know if this is an Azorean, because I'm half Azorean, half mainland, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing my in-laws are from Lisbon, and what they eat very often is just boiled fish, boiled greens, boiled potatoes, and then a boiled egg on top. You mix it all together, and little azeite de vinagre and garlic and salsa, whatever is really good. But yeah, those greens, whether it's couve, whether it's grelhos, whether it's broccoli, that's one time that I can remember where you have your fish, your greens, and your starch, and then you just kind of put it all together.
A typical lunch or dinner would always start with a soup.
Always.
So you're right. Our vegetables was in our soup and we had it all the time, but it was always, it was part of our meal. You never had just your meat and potatoes and rice like everybody says. You're all full of starches. Well, we wouldn't just have that. And it wouldn't be this huge plateful that you're now served when you go into a restaurant. It was half that size, but you always started with a soup, always.
And I love when I go to restaurants in Portugal with friends who are American or they were visiting when I was living in Portugal and living in Lisbon, and I was doing week trips or day trips, different places throughout the country to write the cookbook, and then, of course, the Azores. But I would love it when friends would come and we'd go out to dinner, and they would order something, and they'd get fish or whatever it was, rice and potatoes.
Yep.
They're like, rice and potatoes? I said, yeah, we do both starches. We do not discriminate. We like all our starches.
Yes.
We like rice and potatoes, and sometimes rice and potatoes on top of each other. We really like that. And that's very odd for some people. You either have the rice or the potatoes.
Right.
And I said, no, we do them both.
Yeah, we really do.
So we're coming up. I mean, we could go for another couple hours here, I think, but we are coming up on time. So I did want to ask one last question, and then we can wrap it up. What was the most surprising thing for you when you were living in Lisbon or living in Portugal and exploring the different recipes and figuring out what to put in the book? What was the most surprising thing for you when it came to food?
That's a very, very good question. I don't think that's ever been asked of me. I think, well, there was two things, I think. An eye-opener for me was when I discovered, and this was kind of that familial bigotry that I was talking about earlier, I was shocked that other people made the same food my family made, but they sometimes made it better. I said, wait a minute, what? I had that sort of that bigotry myself. No, this is not how you make trujums. No. This is how we make it. And I'm like, wow, this is really good. So I was surprised by some of the variations of what my family made and what I grew up eating, and what I had heard about so much also from my family. I think the other thing that I found, and I don't want to say it's surprising because I think that is the wrong word, but I really adored was how welcoming people were to allow me into their kitchens or into their homes. Yeah. They wouldn't really know who I was, but it doesn't make a difference because you met someone and they're going to bring you right to this person or this woman or this man who cooks something, and they don't even know each other very well, but the cousin of that one is the cousin of another one who works with this woman's husband, who also happened to have been in the army with this man, and now you're going to be able to see that woman.
And then you're friends for life.
Yeah, which is a wonderful thing. And one of the chefs that I met there, Ilda Vinagra, who has had an amazing impact on my cooking and on my book, who taught me so many things. And one of the greatest things she taught me was something called milk mayonnaise the Leite, which is not very well known. But it's definitely around the border of Spain and Portugal, where it's an emulsion of milk and olive oil, a little bit of garlic, and white pepper, and it transforms so many things. And it was one of the things I was so fortunate enough when I came back, and it was in the book, and the book was published and did well, that people gravitated towards. So we had people discovering Portuguese cuisine only because their kid has an allergy to eggs, so therefore they were looking for an egg-free
Oh, how
variation.
awesome is that?
Mayonnaise.
Yeah.
And it quote unquote, it can't be officially called a mayonnaise because mayonnaise is an emulsion of egg and oil and vinegar, egg and oil and an acid. And this has got acid too with it's lemon juice, but there's no egg. And I was so honored and thrilled that people were learning about Ilda, who now is in Brazil cooking. And there's an article on my website called "The Mistress of the Alentejo," and how this woman worked in 2 different restaurants and a catering kitchen all at once, and was the chef to the Portuguese consul in the Dakota in New York City, and had met Lauren Bacall and had met the guy who owned one of the major restaurants in New York, and Yoko Ono. I mean, all of them. She knew them all because they loved her cooking. And so it was an amazing impact. And meeting her and being led into her kitchen, and when I left, she wanted me to stay in her house because the only way I could learn about her, she said, was to do it the Portuguese way, which was to eat in her house and sleep in her house. Then I left. What did she have for me? She had a gift for me, like the Barcelos rooster.
The rooster,
and
yes.
My mother and my father, she gave them both lamb's wool slippers from the sheep, the lamb and the sheep that were the sheep's. Yeah, that's the gift she gave from my parents. She never met my parents. Yeah. And she gave me gifts for them. That's what you call Portuguese hospitality.
That is. Absolutely. And something that we're known for, which is something we can be very proud of, because everybody that I've ever talked to that has gone to Lisbon, or any part of Portugal actually, is they always talk about the Portuguese hospitality and how welcome they felt.
Yes.
So,
very much.
David, we have 1,000 more questions for you, so we're gonna have to have you on again.
I would love to.
Yes. That would be awesome.
But thank you so much for your time. We know what a busy guy you are, but this has been so fun and just amazing. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed it just as much as we have enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, David. You're a treasure. You really are, honey.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye. So how much do we love David?
Oh my God, he's
just
so
awesome.
He's so awesome. He's so cute. I mean, he's just, we love him. I mean, that's what happens when you just love the guest that you have on, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing that I forgot to mention to him, or while we were on the call, is if you read the about section of his page, he has the story of Manny the milkman, and how his mother said, "Oh, you're the milkman's son," and he thought to himself at 5 years of age, "How is Mr. Lawton, our milkman, my father?" And I was like, oh my gosh, Lawton, there's the name. Maria's dad or her father-in-law.
My father-in-law
is David's milkman. Anyway, I thought that was a funny little coincidence,
No, Ken Lawton was not a milkman. So. Plus, they lived in Rhode Island, so a whole different state. But
if you go, I really encourage all of our listeners to go to his website, because it is just packed with great recipes, and not just Portuguese. So let's put the disclaimer out there. He's not doesn't just write about Portuguese stuff, but man, he's got some excellent recipes on there, and his articles are funny. He's a really funny writer. He is,
and he's funny in person too. In having conversations with him, and we had an amazing time. We've met a couple of times, and we did a book signing together too. And he's just great. He's a very genuine person, and he's so gracious. He actually was the recipient of a Palcus Leadership Award a few years ago when we had the gala in Connecticut. Wow. And, how nice. And he was so gracious and down to earth, and just was so touched by the recognition from the community, and we were really happy to be able to do that. And he's a great guy, and I'm happy, number one, that we got him to come on, because I know, like you said in the beginning, he's so busy with everything, and he's got people. I mean, he's got people. He's got people. He's going to take care of those people. I know. I aspire to have people someday. Yeah, we will too, honey. We will aspire to have people one day. But in the meantime, he has them. He has the people. And we had said, well, hopefully we won't take up too much of your time. And we thought maybe a half hour or maybe,
no.
But we went all this time with him, which was so awesome. And he wants to come back. So even better. So
Yep.
So folks that are listening to this, once again, his cookbook is called The New Portuguese Table by David Leite, and he has a what do you call it? A blog called Leite's Culinaria. Yep. So it's stuff for you to check out, to buy the book, support a fellow Portuguese cookbook author, and I know now he's working on his memoir, and I can't wait till it comes out and we get to see that and we get to read that, because he is a great writer, and I know it'll be a great success.
Yep, it will.
All right, folks.
All right,
well,
then.
This is it. This is another one down.
Another one in the books.
Another one in the books. Oh, God.
It's done.
Yes. All right, honey. Well, you have a wonderful one. And to everyone listening out there, thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate it. Sending you all hugs and kisses. Thank you.
And send us your feedback. We want to hear from you as well.
Yeah, and we love getting that feedback, and we love getting the notes we've been getting lately, which is we're listening to it now and we love it. So can't get any better than that.
I know. Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks again for listening to our Portuguese Table podcast.
If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do so on SoundCloud or iTunes.
And all episodes can be found on our website at www.ourportuguesetable.com.
You can also reach us at feedback@ourportuguesetable.com with comments, questions, or suggestions.
Até a próxima!